Welcome to Well Warrior Culture, a community of support based on my books, Wellness Warrior Style, Mindfulness for Warriors, the Mindfulness for Warriors Handbook, and the 21-Day Meditation Jumpstart Journal. This is the Well Warrior Show, and I'm your host, Kim Colegrove. I work with society's warriors, protectors, guardians, and healers, and your families to help you rebuild resilience and embrace well-being. If your profession exposes you to trauma or the trauma of others, Well Warrior Culture is for you. You deserve to live, work, and retire healthfully, and I'm glad you're here. And now, on with the show. Hello, friends. Welcome to the Pause First Academy Well Warrior Show. I'm your host, Kim Colegrove, and today I'm sitting down with Jamie Waymeyer. Jamie is a licensed clinical social worker, and she's the clinical director of The Battle Within, which is a 5-day retreat in nature for veterans, first responders, and frontline medical staff. And the 5-day program is meant to help them heal. Welcome, Jamie.
Thank you, Kim. I'm excited to be with you.
I'm really happy for you to be here. I also interviewed Jamie for my book, Wellness Warrior Style, and I loved that interview with you so much, Jamie. It was very real and raw and vulnerable and interesting, and I really appreciate that you're taking the time to sit down with me today. One thing that you shared with us in that interview is that you have a long history of working in social work, but you didn't really fully understand the trauma that your clients were dealing with until you experienced a devastating trauma of your own. So I want to get into that just a little bit, but I want to give you a minute to introduce yourself, talk a little bit about the battle within, and just tell us about yourself.
Sure. Thank you so much. So, as you said, I'm a licensed clinical social worker, and I've been practicing. I kind of always say it feels like since I was a baby at this point, but I spent most of my career working in community mental health. When fresh out of school with my bachelor's degree, I started working in a women and children's substance use program in the inner city, and what I learned very quickly is that I did not learn any of the skills that I needed to work with folks who had experienced significant trauma. I was hearing story after story about, individual trauma, family trauma, generational trauma, and nobody taught me the skills I needed to be able to work with folks. So from the time I started working in the field, I really took an interest in understanding trauma and understanding how we could help people heal. So from working with in the substance use field for about 11 years, I then transitioned over to more of the mental health side, still in community mental health. But I was just curious when I started that work, would I see the same thing? Would it be the same experience of folks who come in with significant trauma? And of course, it was, either as a result of, childhood trauma, as a result of having a diagnosis of chronic and persistent mental illness, and the just the trauma that comes along with having that diagnosis. So I continued to do that work, as I moved into the more the mental health side, but at the same time, this, idea around trauma-informed practices started emerging in our field, and, um, and I started reading about it, and it at that point resonated with me so much because trauma-informed practices wasn't just about clinical work. It wasn't just about therapy. It was actually that's a small component of it, but trauma-informed practices was really about how do we do everything we can in our realm to make sure that folks are well, and so that means physical space, mental space. How do we welcome people when they come into our organizations to make sure that they're well? But the other piece that really, really appealed to me is that by that time I had been doing I had been in administration for a long time. I'd been a manager, I'd supervised many people, and I had seen the impact of secondary trauma on these folks who worked for me. I'd seen people leave the field because they just couldn't maintain that high level of stress related to the job. And so trauma-informed practices address that as well. It's about taking good care of us so that we can continue to do the job that we um, that we love, and be well while we do that. So I became a champion for trauma-informed practices in that organization and really worked to make changes so that we could create safe spaces for not just our clients, but also for the staff who were doing the hard job, for the visitors who came through our door, really for everybody. Um, and then um, and then about 6 years, I don't know if you want me to share a little bit now about just kind of how I transitioned into the battle within, or
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to pause you just for a second. I hope you don't lose your train of thought, but
no.
I just wanted to follow up on a term that you mentioned, which is secondary trauma. So,
Mhm.
for people who are listening and those who might be sort of new to these topics,
Yeah.
secondary trauma is being exposed to and impacted by or affected by the trauma of others. So, as Jamie speaks about this from that social worker perspective, whatever your profession is, whether you're in the military space, you're a veteran, you're in the first responder space, or any of those surrounding professions, you don't have to encounter the trauma firsthand for it to impact and affect you. So I just wanted to um, define that for people who are listening. I
Yeah.
might wonder what secondary trauma is.
So I was doing this work, really working hard to integrate trauma-informed practices into the organization I was working at, and then 6.5 years ago, um, I experienced my own significant trauma when my 17-year-old son Jake was murdered by one of his friends. When that happened, obviously it changed who I am. I am actually not the same person that I was. You would be meeting a different woman had we known each other 7 or 8 years ago. But what I learned was that what I was teaching about, I wasn't hitting all the spots that needed to really be addressed. I didn't really understand how trauma changes the brain and body until my own brain and body changed as a result of my trauma. And so I felt like there were pieces that were missing, which led me to a different path as far as my career. And so from there, I actually I returned to my work for about a year, and what I noticed there is that even though I thought we had been doing a lot of work around trauma-informed practices, folks still didn't understand how to deal with me. I was a lot after I lost my son, and um, I, I felt that even though I didn't think that people were intentionally harming me. They were harming me. They were harming the rest of my family. My son, who went back to school in a school system that didn't know how to deal with him. I just saw that kind of roll down, and that led me to leave that work and start doing consulting, coaching, teaching around trauma informed practices. And I did that for a few years when the battle within kind of fell into my lap, if you will. I wasn't really looking for a job, but when I heard about the mission of the Battle Within and at the just way that they address the trauma that's experienced by veterans and first responders, I couldn't resist it. I had
Yeah,
to join
yeah.
that team.
I hear you. I say, yeah, it's kind of the same thing happened to me, different details. But once I heard about this program, I just wanted to be a part of it. Let's pause here for just a second. And will you just tell us a little bit about exactly what you're talking about, what you guys offer at the Battle Within, and especially for people who are just not familiar with the program at all, filling in a little bit of the details on the 5 days and that.
So the 5-day program is, I call it an intensive program. I know you called it a retreat, but it's not like a retreat. Like what
Yeah,
people, I don't want people to have this misnomer that it's a retreat where you're gonna be dealing with a lot of sunshine and happiness every single minute of every
right.
day
No,
because
no
it's a
slices
lot
of
of work.
cucumbers on the eyelids and that. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's yeah,
exactly,
yes.
exactly. Because it is a lot of work. The 5-day program it kind of builds on itself. Every day is a day of learning, with really the idea of not folks coming into our program and being healed after 5 days, but folks coming into our program and being given the tools so that they can continue on their journey. And so we have providers who are experts in different areas who come in and teach different days. So, which is how we know you, Kim. Of course, you come in on Mondays and you teach mindfulness and meditation, and that's really to me a vital start to the week is because of what you teach around. mindfulness and meditation, you also start to teach about the brain science and start to have an understanding of why it's so important that we learn these different ways to to manage our brains and bodies when we're feeling uh, when we're in a trauma response, when we're feeling stressed because of the work that we do or because of the life that we live. Quite frankly, it doesn't have to
A
be because of
hundred
the
percent.
job, right?
Yeah, yeah. And I think for me, the foundation of that and why I believe that meditation is kind of a foundational wellness habit is because the one of the core reasons for practicing meditation is to practice and develop the ability to self-regulate. So regulation is like a superpower once you understand it and you learn how to use it. And so I think
Absolutely.
that's foundational for people in this demographic because a lot of them have completely lost the ability to regulate it all. They're so dysregulated, no fault of their own. So I agree with you. That's a great start to the week, and I love that you guys stick with that throughout the entire week. So anyway, yeah, go on.
Yeah, so we start with the mindfulness and meditation, and then we have some group like what I guess what I think about is more traditional group therapy that happens during the week where we sit in a circle, we process some things, but but we don't. Again, the idea is not you're gonna come in and tell us every terrible traumatic thing that's happened to you because one, we don't want to we don't want to traumatize the other folks that are in the room, but also that is not the goal. The goal is not to like vomit everything out and then leave you in 5 days with all of that being exposed. You know, it's kind of like an open wound that you just put a
A
band-aid over.
100%. Yes.
Um,
And I always tell people who are interested, this is not a place to go and tell your war stories.
right,
I mean,
right.
you will do some sharing, but it's not sitting around the campfire trying to out war story each other. Yeah.
Exactly, exactly. So we do that, and then again, that whole time is about regulation. So you share, we do some grounding, we do some things to make sure that you're in a safe space, and then we have another one of our providers who's a licensed professional counselor. She comes in and teaches the afternoon, teaches about emotional regulation. We have somebody who comes in and teaches about nutrition and fitness, and we actually they do a workout while they're there just to practice some of these different things. And then we also then when we shift into the middle part of the week, we do some experiential healing. I'm not going to share all of the details about that because folks who are listening who go through the program, I want them to have that healing experience themselves. But what that means is, and this is the thing that attracted me because this is what has helped me a lot with my own healing, is not being focused on just traditional therapy as the way to heal, but that's a part of it. So we do some work around ceremony. And one of the things that we know just in our society in general is we've lost ceremony as a way to heal. If you think
Oh,
about
man.
how
Yeah.
important ceremony is, and if I think about like COVID, it's given me so many good examples when our ceremonies were taken away from us. You know, we
Yeah.
weren't able to have funerals, we weren't able to have weddings, we weren't able to have graduations. All of those things are an important part of our healing, of our connection to other people, of all of those pieces. And so that's a big part of what we have put in because we also know that historically, when warriors would go to war, there would be ceremonies to send them to war, and there would be
Yeah.
ceremonies to welcome them back home. Again, that is something that is missing, not just for our
Yeah.
veterans, for our first responders who are essentially going to war every day,
Oh my gosh. Yes,
and
yes,
there's
yes.
no transition time. So,
Yeah, when we
um,
lived as when we lived back that, back in wherever we came from back in the day, not only did we welcome them home and there was ceremony, but we cared for them. We cared for
right,
them. They were allowed to rest. We fed them. We cared for them. We knew they needed rest and healing and community. And you're so right. We've lost such a huge piece of that. I apologize for interrupting, but
no,
yeah,
no, you're
such a
good.
great
Yeah.
point.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's a big part of really throughout the week. We do different things to infuse ceremony into the week. With the idea that if you have an understanding of how you can use that, you don't have to sit in a circle with other people, you can do that on your own as well. Letter writing is a powerful tool that we teach while we're there, but that's a tool that I use all the time whenever I'm really struggling and I need to release some things. I use writing. We teach about journaling, all of those different pieces. So Wednesday we go through that. We talk a little bit about personality and how our personalities impact our relationships. And then Thursday we have equine therapy. So again, the idea that therapy doesn't always have to look like you and I sitting in a room doing one-on-one. Therapy can look all different ways. And then we have a marriage and family therapist who comes in the afternoon and spends a significant period of time talking with the participants about family of origin stuff and current day relationships. So, one of the things that I've heard time and time again, as folks come through is, I thought I was coming here because of the trauma I experienced on the job. Turns out, I have a lot of other traumas in my life that I didn't address, or
Yeah,
childhood trauma that I have never talked about. Um, Something about this field, we all seem to have stories that bring us to do the work that we do, and so
it
we
is
certainly.
true. Yes, and that's people who the helpers, that work with these demographics, and people in the demographic that are, the servant warriors. We all do seem to have trauma, and a lot of it's childhood trauma. And I love that you bring awareness to the family of origin on top of this difficult profession that is bound to present trauma, that they might have carried some childhood or early life trauma into this profession. And that awareness can be transformational for people. Difficult in the beginning, but at least it's conscious now. At least you're aware of it. So I love that you address that.
Right, right. Absolutely, absolutely. And then we end up on Friday, we have again another some ceremony things that we do in to kind of close up, wrap up the group. Um, and we have a graduation then for the participants at the end of the day. The thing that I mean I can describe all the things that happen, the things that are I think most valuable that you can only experience is the connection that happens with um, other warriors who have experienced not the same thing, but similar. There's a connection that happens that is um, vital to that healing process because so many folks come into our program and they think I'm the only person
Yeah.
who's experienced something as terrible as whatever it is that's happened as a result of the work that they do. So that connection that happens, and then also the along with that connection is kind of rebuilding their empathy towards themselves, but also towards each other. One of the things I know about warriors and doing this work is that um, our empathy gets tamped down. We see some of the worst of humanity, um, and sometimes it's difficult to stay in a spot of kindness, a spot of empathy towards others. And so that 5 day program and having the chance to hear other people's stories and deeply connect with them also seems to start that kind of rebuilding process of empathy as well. So that's kind of that program in a nutshell. I want to talk about the Frontline Therapy Network as well. Just
Oh yeah, I want to make sure we touch on that before we
yeah,
leave.
just
Before we leave the court, yeah, let's make sure
yeah,
we definitely talk
yeah,
about
for
that.
sure.
Um, so before we leave this, you probably see me. I keep looking down because I'm taking notes. Uh,
Mhm.
so just some of the down and dirty details about the battle within for anyone who's listening, a little curious. It's a 5 day program and it's absolutely free. It's 100% donor funded, so it doesn't cost you anything. You just have to find the 5 days and they get themselves there, right?
Yep, yep. Get yourself
Okay.
there, and we'll take care of the rest.
Yeah. And then one thing I wanted to point out is that the curriculum for this program was created by a combat veteran who came back from war and couldn't find the right help that he needed. And so ended up going back to school and became a therapist, a clinician, a counselor himself. And he created the curriculum. So I think that sets it apart from some other programs, probably. And then also the fact that the mentors are all peers. They're all people who have gone through the program themselves and continue to work the program. And I think that's important too. Do you want to talk a little bit about?
Yeah, I was gonna say
Um,
I'd love to say a little something about the
yes,
mentors. So,
please.
I think one of the unique but also most powerful things about the program is that we have mentors who volunteer a week of their time to come back to the battle within, um, to the Revenant Journey is what we call the 5-day program, to the Revenant Journey and spend time just holding space for. I say just because it's actually huge, but
Yeah, yeah.
holding space for the cohort that's going through at that time. And so being a mentor means they're there, they stay the night with them. They're the ones who are there 24/7 during that 5-day period. And really just showing, first of all, showing the participants that there's light on the other side, that you can get better, that you can heal, but also just having a safe person to connect with that is not going to judge them, that is just open to the possibilities of healing from the stories that they've experienced. They just sit and and sometimes share a little bit of their story. That's not even a big part of it. That they share some of that, but it's really more just I am there for you. I will hold you up during this week. I will step out with you if somebody struggles during a group and steps out. I promise you that there's always one or two mentors who are going to follow behind to make sure that they're okay. Um, the mentors are really a true gift to the program, and I think why it's so successful is that connection that happens with people who have been there and have done the work after they leave the Revenant journey. That's the other piece of it, is that they are reinforcing um, our message, which is 5 days is not enough. You know, you're still going to need therapy. You're still going to need to practice mindfulness when you leave. You're still going to need to journal. The things that you've learned during this 5-day program. I'm living that right now. And that's why I feel joy again. That's why I've found healthier relationships. It's because I kept working after I left the program.
Yes, yes. And you said earlier, and this is hugely important, it's not a one and done. So you don't go to the 5 days and then you're healed. You had mentioned earlier, you guys aren't there to heal them. You're there to offer and teach them tools to help them heal themselves. And so that's important for people to know. You know, you can't expect to go to a 5-day program and then you just go back to life as usual and you're healed. There will be a maintenance that's required. And if that sounds daunting to people, which I'm sure it does in the beginning, but I think, gosh, but now you'll have some tools, and the heavy lifting will be integrating those tools upon departure of the program and as you move back into your life, because nothing about your life is going to change. It's going to be you changing. You guys give them so many tools, and now they also have this community that they can lean on, reach out to, communicate with, to help them keep going. So there's just so many little components of this program that we could mention to people. I'm clearly a huge believer in it. I've been
Same.
working with this organization since 2018. I've made some great friends. I mean, I'm there on day one, and I've sat in front of classrooms on day one and looked into the eyes of people that I wasn't sure would make it through the program, quite frankly, that made it through. And some of those people have become friends of mine now, and I've just seen some amazing transformations. And for some people that were really in a very dark place, it gave them that first step. You guys offered them that first step onto their healing path. And so anyway, yeah, it's all good stuff. And now tell us a little bit about the frontline network, that we don't want to breeze past that.
Yeah, I just think that it's important because again, so the Frontline Therapy Network is it was actually started in the midst of COVID as a result of us being told we couldn't have the 5-day program. Obviously, there was no gathering allowed. We had a full class rostered, and we knew we needed to give them something. And so we quickly rallied the clinical community, the therapy community, and created a network of therapists who we vet to make sure that they have the skills necessary to work with the unique traumas that are experienced by veterans, first responders, and now frontline medical staff as well. Um, and we connect. At the time, it was just get these 10 guys who are scheduled to come in. Let's get them connected with a therapist so that they still have some supports. But now we do that on a regular basis. We connect veterans, first responders, frontline medical staff with therapists who, one, have the skills, are trained in the modalities that are necessary to heal folks with trauma, and then also have take their insurance so that they can continue on. We do cover the cost of the first 6 to 10 sessions. Um, if necessary, if somebody comes in and they don't have insurance, they have high copays, the barriers, the things that are barriers for folks to get help, we address that by helping to defer that cost for the beginning. But we also know that 6 to 10 sessions is not enough time for somebody to really dig in and start doing the work and healing. And so we want to make sure we connect folks with somebody who does take their insurance as well as can provide the correct type of therapy for them. So when we start with that conversation day one in the Revenant journey with, when you're done with these 5 days, you need to be in therapy, and we will help connect you if you want us to. That it's that important to us. We know this because of our outcomes that we when we do our assessments post Revenant journey and also post frontline therapy. We know that the therapy therapy along with the Revenant journey improves outcomes significantly. And so we talk about it every single day. Every single day we talk about like what's the work, how, and every cohort, I'll say I have at least one person who says to me, "Well, Jamie, I tried therapy,
Yeah.
and um, when they started hearing my story, the therapist started crying and saying, I just don't even know how you keep going
Oh
on
my
with
gosh, yes.
it."
Oh,
Right?
I've heard that so many times. And yeah, and we're going to get into that as we move into
Yeah,
talking about mental health interventions for warriors specifically. Yeah, that is really a barrier to entry. I mean, they leave and they don't ever want to go back if they feel like they've traumatized the therapist.
exactly.
Real quick, though, on the Frontline Therapy Network, um, so this was established in the state of Missouri, which is the state where you're located.
Mhm.
And so, how do you handle people that come through the battle within that are not in the state of Missouri? Is this available to people across the country, or how does that work?
Yeah, so the Revenant Journey is available to anyone across the country. Again, just as you said, it's the cost is covered. You just have to be able to get there, and then we will take it from there. Frontline Therapy Network. If you've gone through the Revenant Journey, we will match you with somebody in your state. Full disclosure, that sometimes takes a little bit more time for us to find that right connection. So but we do bring folks into our network from out of the state to because it's just that important to us that we vet people, that we make sure that they have the skills necessary to serve warriors. And so you still can have that service even if you're out of state. Um, Here in the Missouri Kansas side, we do have folks and a little bit out of state who will start therapy first because they're waiting to get into a class, or they're
Ah, okay.
yeah, so we try and get them if it's gonna be a month or 2 before we can get you rostered in, then we want you to start therapy. We don't want you to wait. There's no
Okay.
excuses to wait.
That was
So,
something I did not know. I was
yeah.
not aware of that. That's really good to know.
Yeah,
Okay.
no excuses. We're gonna get you some help. We don't want you to wait 2 or 3 months to get started. So we do have folks who come in who've been in working with the Frontline Therapy, Network, for a couple months, and then they go to the program, and it I kinda think about it as like a jump start to healing, it just
Yeah. Yeah.
gives
Yeah.
you everything that you need right then to keep doing the work.
That makes so much sense. Oh, okay. Well, yet another reason to love your organization. Okay, so let's move on and talk about mental health interventions for warriors. And when I talk about warriors, I want to be really clear. do my best to remember to mention this more regularly when I'm talking to people. I have a very broad definition of warriors. So we are talking about active military veterans and first responders, but there's a whole lot of professions that are just like right outside of that first responder realm that I consider a warrior, and that, I hope will at least take advantage of the information and the support and the education that we have at Paws First Academy. So that's social workers, mental health professionals, parole and probation, victim service advocates, um, attorneys, prosecuting attorneys, defense attorney. There's just a whole world. We recently worked with court reporters, another very traumatized demographic that doesn't get a lot of attention. So, um, for those of you who wouldn't consider yourself a traditional first responder, you're not a police officer or a paramedic, um, the information that we're talking about and I think the barriers to entry in terms of mental health interventions and therapy and things like that, I think that's really similar across all these professions. So I want to get into what mental health interventions you recommend, what's useful. Obviously, I'm a big fan of therapy, talk therapy. That's something that a lot of people are hesitant to step into. And then along with that, I want to talk about, what else they could consider, what other kind of therapies. You mentioned equine therapy, there's group therapy. I mean, there's a whole lot of therapeutic interventions that don't necessarily have to be, you lying down on a couch while you talk to somebody sitting in an armchair. So let's jump into that.
Yeah, gosh, I don't know what I would do if somebody made me lay down while I was in a therapy session.
Well,
That'd be
that's all the cartoons, and all the little
I know,
memes you
that's what I'm
always
like
see.
picturing, like the Sigmund Freud cartoon, so,
Yeah.
yeah, for sure. So that is you know, we are finally thinking about trauma, um, I think taking it seriously. I guess that's the way that I would describe it, as far as, interventions and how we can help folks heal and, recognizing that, that for many folks, talk therapy is not enough. I would say for most people, at some point, you probably are gonna need to have some one-on-one therapy to process, the experiences that you've had, but also sometimes talk therapy is way too overwhelming if your brain is not functioning at a normal level, if your brain is not, if you're constantly in fight, flight, or freeze mode and your brain is not able to, kinda manage even just daily normal stressors, you probably have to address that first. And so, the lovely thing now is that we know that there's therapies that specifically help with that. There's EMDR, there's neurofeedback. On the rise right now is ketamine and how it can help folks. Stay tuned to that because that's having some miraculous effects on folks who have experienced significant trauma, particularly veterans and first responders, who the needle just doesn't seem to move or doesn't seem to stay. You make a little progress, but then you slide back. So,
Right.
so
Let's
that
stop right there for just one quick second and talk just a little bit about that, because
yeah,
I know that there will be people watching or listening, and I encounter a lot of people who feel like their brain is broken.
yes,
I mean, there's just some kind of a rewiring or a misfiring or something, and they sense that. And I've had, I mean, many different people, including my own husband at one time, said, "I feel like my brain is broken," and so they feel stuck in this loop. So can we just address that really quickly? I mean, that's a massive trauma response. Um,
yeah, for
and so
sure.
if someone who's feeling like that, what might be like kind of a gentle first step, and then a next step they might consider?
Yeah. So I really think for most of us who've experienced trauma, like I said, I didn't really understand this until I went through it myself, that rewiring, um, and how easy it is for us to kind of slide back into that, even after we've done a lot of work and a lot of healing. For example, for myself, sleep was a thing that was like pretty much non-existent for me in the first year after losing Jake. Like I would fall asleep, but if I woke up, it was all over. Like no matter what, I could not. get my brain to calm down to sleep. I just couldn't do it. I just was stuck in a loop, as you say, stuck in that loop. And so I tried neurofeedback, which literally rewired my brain so that I could close my eyes and rest. Whereas that no matter what I was trying, it wasn't getting better. I was trying to do different things, meditating. I was trying to listen to bilateral stimulation to help me to sleep, like all these different like home remedies, if you will. But it wasn't breaking through until I got some help with my brain. And I think that that's a piece that is missing, is that we think it's as easy as like, let's do some talk therapy, and then we'll be on the other side of it.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. People do not understand the impact that trauma has on the physical brain and the physical body, your body chemistry. There's a book out there that we always recommend to people called "The Body Keeps the Score." The Body Keeps the Score, and I think that's a great book for people to read or listen to really understand how. And it, again, it doesn't have to be your own trauma in your personal life. It can be
right.
this work you do where you are exposed to and impacted by the trauma of others. Uh, so
Can I say one
what
thing
you,
about that to help
yeah,
people
please.
understand that? Here's the this was just when I was, in the last few years, as I've been trying to really understand the brain science a little bit more, I read something, I can't even remember where I read it, but it stuck with me so, profoundly. Our brain doesn't distinguish between secondary trauma versus primary trauma. We experience something directly to us, and it impacts our brain a certain way, but let's say I'm on the job and I witness something, or somebody comes and tells me a story, my brain doesn't say, "Oh, that's not my story to hold."
That's right. The brain
My
cannot tell the difference a hundred
right,
percent. And
right.
you have the symptoms mimic
Yes,
direct trauma. Yeah.
yes, yes, and so just knowing that, and I also have, I mean, just kind of my own belief, by the way, is that warriors and veterans, I don't know that that's secondary trauma, that's primary trauma a lot of the times, because they're going through it themselves. They're truly experiencing, um, uh, trauma, that, that's not separated from them, if you will. But again, I don't even know that it's necessary to distinguish that, because the brain responds the way the brain responds. And
Yeah,
so,
I agree with you. I agree with you. I wish we didn't have to separate it, and we don't really need to separate it. However, what I know to be true from my own life experience is in these professions, my world is law enforcement. That's my husband was in law enforcement.
mm,
Um, there was no context for being upset when you witnessed someone else's trauma and you had to work a case or work a scene, or that was so you weren't harmed, you weren't injured, or you weren't physically harmed, but you were there and you saw it and you took care of it anyway. And then you kind of can't get your what together after that. I've heard story after story after story about people not knowing how to deal with that, and then maybe going to a supervisor, their sergeant, or to a supervisor, and say, hey, that thing that happened a week ago, like, it has really gotten to me. And the rhetoric for generations was, well, this is the job. So if you can't handle it, there's the door. Suck it up. I mean,
right,
that was there. So there was no context for them. So that's why I feel like it's important for us to define
yeah,
and describe secondary trauma, because
yep,
it's okay that you are having all these thoughts, memories, feelings, you can't sleep, because of something that you witnessed or something that you took part in. And it's not just as simple as suck it up, or this is the
right,
job. And finally these professions are starting to understand the importance of so that's the reason I think to define it and delineate it for these people in these professions that feel like they're just supposed to be tough and take it on and take it in and cowboy up and everything.
right,
It's not like that. It impacts your brain in just the same way as it would if that was your family member or that happened directly to you. Yeah, I just want to let people off the hook with all this. People think they're weak. They feel like they're not good at their job. They feel like they can't get their act together. And I just want to give everybody a big break. There are physiological reasons why this is happening to you, why you're having these emotional responses. So I love this conversation. Anyway,
Absolutely.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay, what else? So we talked about, I've taken so many crazy notes here because I want to make sure that I capture some of these things for a list, like a list of resources. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about, uh, let's address the people who might be listening who do have that barrier to entry. They, they just don't know about therapy. Maybe they went once or twice, it didn't work for them, or they don't know how to find a therapist, or they feel embarrassed, they don't want their employer to know, all these barriers. Can we kind of just chat about that for a minute?
For sure, for sure. So I'm a storyteller, Kim. So I'm going to tell two stories about this.
Okay.
Uh, one, I so when I left left the community mental health center and I started doing speaking about trauma and its impact and I started having the opportunity to speak to first responders. I actually spoke to one of my cousins who was a first responder who experienced significant on the job trauma, significant time and time again. And he also, unfortunately, I mean, he had to identify my son's body, I mean, so his trauma was, again, I mean, he just had trauma after trauma after trauma, and that was kind of it. That was kind of the final thing that he said, "I can't keep doing this anymore," and so he had to medically retire. As I was starting to speak to veterans and first responders, I had a conversation. He's also a veteran, so he got to hear from me quite a bit at first. I said, what should I be talking about? What should I say? Like, what, as somebody who's lived this, what do you want me to tell people? And he said, don't wait. He said, I wish I wouldn't have waited um, 20 years into my career to get therapy. I wish I would have gotten the help that I needed. And and uh, I mean, how much do we wish that for our veterans and first responders? If there's one gift I would give to every person starting in an academy, whether it be law enforcement, whether it be fire, whether it be basic training, whatever that is, if I could give them the gift of mindfulness, meditation, emotional regulation skills, normalizing responses, just that piece of it. Um, that's what I would do. So if someone's listening and they're like, meh, I don't know, I'm scared. Like being scared is really normal. I respect that fear. Um, and also it could save your life. Uh, so I mean I think that has really stayed with me, but the other thing that has stayed with me in the last year that I've sat in cohorts and listened to the participants that come through, is when we have somebody who is a 20-year veteran who is now at the end of their career, they're coming in because they're getting ready to retire and they don't know what the heck they're going to do, and that shift is happening. And then we have in that same class a 25-year-old who is just starting. Um, the communication between that veteran who says, "I wish I would have sat in that seat when I was your age." So I mean that if I mean I can say it all day long, but take it from your peers. Don't wait, don't wait.
Yeah.
You and I both know our mentor who is a Vietnam veteran who is 78 years old, who went through when in his early 70s went through the battle within, and how many times he says, I'm finally living my life. I finally have hope again. And how I wish I would have done this
Yeah.
years and
This
years
is
ago.
this is the golden recommendation of this conversation. I interviewed a, a now retired first responder for Wellness Warrior Style. Um, oh, he's also in the Mindfulness for Warriors handbook. And it was part of his primary counsel to his peers. At the end of his interview, he said, "Don't wait and let this ruin your life, because it will." And, he still feels like he waited too long, wished he wouldn't have waited so long. He's on the path now, but it hasn't been smooth sailing. Um, he reached out for help for the first time after, I think, nearly 30 years in the profession. And so, yeah, I think if there was one thing that you and I could emphasize today, it would be do something today.
Yeah.
Like, as soon as we wrap up and say goodbye, go Google something, reach out to me,
Reach out to me, like,
reach out to, yeah,
absolutely.
go to the Battle Within website and reach out and just say, hey, I just want to talk to somebody. Reach out to a peer, a trusted mentor. Like, take a step today, take any step today. And then just keep taking little steps. If you're new, if you're in your 20s and you're kind of new to the profession, uh, start now. Like, don't wait, don't feel invincible. Like, I'm good now, but I'll keep this in my back pocket. Start adopting practices and habits now to keep your mental and emotional health strong. And if you're getting closer to the end of your career, you know, don't give up here, and don't feel deflated because we're saying you should have started earlier. Any time is the right time to start. What is that saying? The right time to plant a tree is whatever that saying is. Right now, right now is
Today,
the,
this
yeah,
minute.
today is the
But
best time
yeah,
is to start. So that's excellent, excellent advice. Thanks for bringing that up. Um, I think one thing that happens, we touched on this earlier, is people go, okay, I have to do something, or my marriage is going to end, or my health keeps getting worse every year. I've got to do something, and so they just go see who their insurance, who will take their insurance, and they make an appointment with a therapist. They don't really know what to do because they don't understand the importance of vetting the therapist. And then that's a lot of them come away and they'll say, well, as soon as I started to get down into what's keeping me up at night, the therapist started to cry.
right.
And, then that's another form of, traumatization to the individual. They don't want to trauma dump on other people. So I know we're gonna tell them, well, you got to find a trauma informed therapist, but can you speak just a little bit about how they would go about? I mean, they can always reach out through the Battle Within after they go through the program and say, hey, can you guys help me? But you got an individual who's listening, who wherever across the United States, what are the right questions to ask, or how do they find someone that's culturally competent?
Yeah, absolutely. So yes, you can always reach out to us and we can help. I mean, we have a list and we would definitely help get you connected. Um, but also advocate for yourself. I ask questions when I talk to therapists, and those are the same questions that if you're looking for your own individual therapist, you should ask. Ask them, do they serve veterans? Do they serve first responders? Ask them how that's different. What do you do different when you're working with a first responder than when you're working with somebody who is who doesn't have that background? Ask them what specialties they have in working with therapy. If they tell you that something like, "Well, I'm eclectic." Well, a lot of us therapists are eclectic. I also pull from all over the place to do therapy, and I am not like focused on one single modality. But if I were in private practice, I'm not in private practice right now, but if I were in private practice, I would definitely have specialties in things like EMDR, or I would be trained in neurofeedback, or I mean, if I'm going to serve a population that is that the primary issue is trauma of some sort, I'm going to have specialties in treating that trauma. And so if somebody says to you, if you say, what modalities do you use for trauma? And they say, well, I just meet you where you're at. I just try and connect with you. Um, that's not a good answer. They
Yeah.
need to be telling you what they do differently when they're working with somebody who is a trauma survivor.
And is it fair to ask any questions about their experience with, or uh, Yeah, like, can they just ask, "Are you considered trauma sensitive, trauma informed? Do
Absolutely.
you have specialty education in the field of trauma?" Those are the kind of questions that
Absolutely, I would ask them that, I would ask them well, here also what I know is that if we, if as a clinician, if I, I if if I have, a passion for serving that community, when somebody asks me those questions, I understand the reasons why you're asking those questions. And so I'm going to tell you, for example, I am not a first responder, but I come from a family of first responders. I've seen the effects of it firsthand. Or I am a first responder, and that's why I'm a clinician, and that's why this work is so important to me. Or I am, I am a military wife, and I have seen the impact. Um, it is fair to ask those questions. I don't think it's a requirement that a therapist have that background, but I do think that that when you start to question, we as clinicians understand why you're, not trusting us right off the
Y
bat, right?
yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
so we're gonna share, why this work is so important to us if you ask the question.
Okay, that makes sense. So do you have any advice to, I know people are hesitant to begin. I know that, and scared to get started. And so they'll put it off. Okay. If they take that step and they make that call and then they go to an appointment and they don't like the person or they don't like what's happening or that, and so they give up. Like, how do we convince them that just might not be your person? you know, um, would you recommend give it 2 to 3 times, or go ahead and gut check it on your first time? And if it's not quite a match, and how do we encourage people to please don't give up? You know, back to the drawing board.
Yeah, so I think that that's a personal preference for folks as far as, like trusting yourself. I would say, in my experience that, that this population of folks are fairly intuitive and have a um, pretty good idea when they're in a space with somebody who's not gonna sit, um, and non-judgmentally hold space for them, non-judgmentally listen to them. I say that about myself, like, I think those of us who have experienced trauma have a hypersensitivity to people who cannot hold space for us, who cannot help us, like, I'm at a spot where I'm just like, "I'm not messing around with this. I'm gonna move on, and find a therapist who I feel safe with." This happened to me right after I lost Jake, probably, I don't know, 3 or 4 months after when I was, um, ready for therapy. The first therapist I went to was someone I had actually seen in the past, um, but I could tell that they were more, curious and about the story versus helping me to heal, like, I sensed them away.
Ah,
um
oh,
and that was I never went back, you know what I mean? Like,
oh gosh,
I knew that
yeah.
in my gut, and so I shifted and found a different therapist who I'm still with today, and so, um
I'll bet a lot of people listening just kind of lit up around that because, that's a thing people do. That's an insensitive thing that um, just average Joe people do is, asking people um, in these fields really sensitive personal questions, and they ask them so casually, about what's the worst thing you've ever experienced, things like that. Gosh, anyone in the public who's listening, stop asking veterans and first responders questions like that. Don't ask therapists or mental health professionals or social workers, what's the worst thing you've ever seen? That's a horrible question to ask somebody. So that what a great point that the therapist just kind of wanted to know the story and the details.
Yes, and let me say about this
Wow.
because, particularly I think actually for this population, veterans, first responders, frontline medical staff, because, sometimes our stories are in the news, we go into a
Mm,
therapist's office and we're sharing something, um, that that is where I think that therapists sometimes, unintentionally fail people, is because they know the story and now, like, because they're human, they're like, "Well, now I have somebody who I can ask the details of it," right?
yeah,
That's not
yeah.
your role, and if you as a first responder, as a veteran, are going into a situation and somebody is, a therapist is you'll know. Like, I always tell people, "You'll know." Like, I feel it in my gut when someone's crossed a boundary with me. I feel it. Um there's a shift in me. Notice that, pay attention to that, and do
Oh,
something.
I always say this to this
Don't.
population. I always say
Yes.
this to these people. I say, you have well-developed intuition. I'm
Yes.
not saying you're a psychic, will you give me a reading? I'm saying you have developed intuition. Um, you intuitively know the right thing to do. You
Yeah,
you make moves and you act quickly and you intuitively know
absolutely.
the right thing to do. And when you follow that, you save someone's life or you avert a disaster. My husband used to say, on a midnight shift in a one-man patrol car, I'll walk into 9 abandoned buildings to check something out. That 10th abandoned building, a voice in my head says, don't go in there. I'm not going in. That's that
Yeah.
intuition. Like, where does that come from? Yeah, yeah.
And you know
So
what I
so
love what
apply
you
that
just said,
intuition.
Kim,
What?
is that intuition saves our lives. Why can't we honor ourselves when we're doing something like therapy in the exact same way? Because it is the exact same idea. Is I'm going to honor myself and save my life by not going to somebody who's going to do more harm to me.
Oh, it's such a great point. Yeah. So that answers my question that I asked. Like, so, use your own intuition. If you go in and it's uncomfortable and it's not quite right, just check in with yourself. Say, is this because I'm nervous and anxious and this is the first? And you'll know, I'm going to give it a second shot. Or if inside you feel like, nope, then don't ever go back. But please don't give up. Maybe, you
Don't
look
give
for
up.
someone. Yeah, please don't give up.
There's
And I know
so
it's
many
daunting and you're
therapists.
busy and you're
Yes.
exhausted and
Yes.
no
There's
one likes
so
to
many
have to.
therapists who care and who are trained, who are able to help you find hope again. I mean, really, so
Yes,
don't give up because one person didn't know how to take good care of you.
please. This
Yeah.
might be a good segue into our wrap up of just some encouragement of anybody who's listening. Um, we'll just kind of go back and forth and let's give some kind of closing advice here. I'll start with, do something today. Do one thing today. Google one thing, uh, reach out to a friend or a trusted mentor, talk to somebody, just start to do one thing today. Okay, Jamie, you go.
Okay, so if you are so curious, like this brain stuff is fascinating. I never really thought about the impact of trauma on the brain. Um, there are so many podcasts and so many books you can read. Take time and listen to a podcast that talks about the brain science of trauma. Read the book, What Happened to You. I know we referenced The Body Keeps the Score. What Happened to You
Yeah,
is
that's
the
another great one.
the the language of it is like I am not a doctor, and so um,
Yeah.
book was amazing to me. Do something to educate yourself because the more you know about what's happening to your brain and body, the more you're going to want to heal it, the more you're going to want to find the tools.
Yeah, I think it offers so much understanding to a person when they learn that about themselves,
Mhm,
and that they can see light at the end of the tunnel.
mhm.
Um, I would recommend anyone who's curious about trauma go listen to your TED Talk. Can you talk about that real quick?
Oh, sure. So yeah, I did a TED Talk, by the way, probably one of the bravest, craziest things I've done. I've never been so nervous to speak before.
I can't imagine.
But I did a TED Talk that's called Reframing Traumatic Loss, Gifts from Jake. And it's really about how I've I've learned to survive and thrive and be healthy after really the most devastating thing that could ever happen to a person, quite frankly, I believe, in
Yeah,
losing a child. And um, it's about, I think, maybe 16, 18 minutes long, and I really just to try and give you some 3 primary ways that I that have helped me, that I always lean on whenever I'm really struggling, and that's, finding my voice. So I would encourage you, if you are a trauma survivor, finding my voice, being able to advocate for myself, being able to advocate for my family, being able to set boundaries and say no. Finding my voice has saved my life time and time again in the last 6 years. I can't even. I thought I was mouthy before, but now, girl, I'm really mouthy about things that are important to me. So, um, but finding my voice, connecting to others, connecting to others who understand what you're going through. For me as a child loss survivor, connecting to other, child loss survivors has helped me, to heal in ways I didn't really think were possible, and really for me, it was that it's the connection, but it's also, um, seeing how they're still breathing, seeing how they're still moving forward. That has helped me tremendously, and then empathy. Just knowing what it feels like whenever I'm losing empathy and ways that I can get that back. So, yeah,
That's
look into
huge. That's
that.
huge. Give us
Yeah.
the title again.
Gifts from Jake, Reframing Traumatic Loss.
I'll flash that up on the screen for anybody who's interested in that. It's to just you can just, go to
It's
YouTube.
on YouTube. Yeah,
TED
it's on
Talk.
YouTube or it's on the
Yeah.
TEDx website. Either
Yeah.
way. So,
That's excellent. Okay, guys, so do something today, any one thing.
dang.
Start reaching out for resources. I have a massive list of resources I would be happy to share with you if you want to reach out to me. And my contact information is easy to find. It'll be part of this video as well. The massive resource list in the Mindfulness for Warriors handbook and also in Wellness Warrior Style. If you need some resources now, feel free to reach out to me. You can always reach out to the Battle Within. Thebattlewithin.org is the website. Go check it out. If you or someone you know is struggling with anxiety, depression, sleep problems, post-traumatic stress, a diagnosis of PTSD, you've been dealing with trauma symptoms, go to the website, check it out. It's easy to inquire online. And one thing we might want to mention for law enforcement is that it's not like they're so secretive because they're always worried that somebody will find out or think they have mental health or there's nothing there are no records that anyone can subpoena from this, right? I mean, that's a huge concern for law enforcement. I don't know if I'm overstepping or overspeaking here, but check it out. Just go to the website and check it out.
We're bound by HIPAA. I mean, all those things.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. I'm tired of these barriers that prevent people from getting the help that will save their lives, save their
Absolutely.
marriages, save their relationships with their children. So, yeah. Okay. Man, I knew this would be a good conversation and I appreciate your time. I love talking to you. Thanks for all of the golden information that you've given to my audience today. And I'll make sure that all the contact information for the Battle Within and your TED Talk and everything is included here in the notes. Any closing thoughts from you?
Just thank you, Kim, also for what you do and what you teach and I mean, I think it's such a vital part of healing for everyone to really understand how mindfulness and meditation can help. And um, just um, just know that for those that are listening, that are warriors that are questioning, just know that you have a whole community out there waiting, whole
Yes.
community waiting
Yes.
to
Yes.
welcome you in
And
to
you
our
guys,
tribe. So
this wellness and healing community is
yeah.
so much more fun than the Suck It Up community.
For sure, for
I
sure.
promise. Come
Yeah.
join us. Come join
Yes,
us. All
yes.
right, Jamie, thank you very much.
All right, thank you.
Bye bye.